It's customary in the protocol of Robert's Rule of Order. Henry Martin Robert stated that we should start each meeting with God before country. As we reflect on the events and tragedies of 2 airline crashes this week, I'd like to personally, not the voice of the county commissioners nor the government of Lane County, wish to admonish everyone to call upon or pray or give some introspective concern to those who've lost loved ones in these recent situations. I'd also like to say that the communications from this chair have been carefully weighed and considered by those I affected, and I'm pleased to say there have been some positive outreaches for better communication and clarity that may have been misinterpreted at our last gathering. I'm grateful for the grace extended to me by some of those affected to come together for better ways of including and helping communication to be more positive in the way I intended in the future. And for our country, our flag to my right stands there as a representation of a republic that gives rights, freedoms, and protections to everyone. In specific, the white stripes of our banner represent the pure intentions and high ideals we have as a nation to provide a country and direct its government to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now I'd like to formally wish good morning to all in Harris Hall and welcome those joining us online. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners to order. It's Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. Good morning to our esteemed County Administrator, Mr. Mokrasky. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you, Chair.
You look snappy as always today. Thank you. Is there any items that we need to adjust for our agenda, sir?
No adjustments today.
Any emergency business?
No.
Great, thank you. All right, we have the pleasure of our board. We do occasionally. We have employee recognition. We have over 2,000 employees under our direction of our county administrator that do a great job supplying county with needs and operations and roads and public safety and all the things that we do. And occasionally we get to recognize some of those great people. So today, Mr. Mokrasky, you get to recognize someone along with us. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Good morning, and I'll invite John Webster and Keir Miller and Dan Hurley are all welcome to come on up here. Appreciate the patience of the public that's here for public testimony and for the board's items. We do, as you said, Chair, really like to recognize employees occasionally for the incredible work that they do, both to recognize the employees for the great work they do, but also to lift up examples of public service in action and the work of our public employees and how critical it is to the residents of our community. So today we're really pleased to recognize our building official, John Webster. John, I've had the opportunity, some of you may have also had the opportunity to be out in the field with John and see him in action. And so I know these comments will resonate with those of you. Like I've had the opportunity to spend time with John and see him in action, the way in which he conducts his business. Because our work in the public sector is both about our technical knowledge and savvy and our ability to do the technical work we have to do. It's also about how we go about doing that work, how we engage with residents, with our colleagues, with stakeholders on different issues to solve challenges. I'll just note that we have three core behaviors in Lane County that we hold up, and we say when our employees, when we are at our best, we are demonstrating a passion to serve, a drive to connect, and a focus on solutions. And so that's what we recognize our employees for here, is demonstrating one or all of those core behaviors. John, in particular, has recently received the Oregon Building Officials Association, so his state association, Special Recognition Exceptional Leader Award. According to OBOA, the Oregon Building Officials Association, there was more glowing input that was received for John's nomination than for any other group in history, in its history. And John has commented about what he appreciates about his job, and he said his favorite parts of the job are when he gets to work with staff and the community to communicate tough and often complicated building concepts so they can help themselves succeed with their projects. I've seen this firsthand. It's really fun to see that, you know, folks that are doing projects, sometimes, you know, we all do housing related projects from time to time, and we don't always know all the rules. And John and his team take passion in helping folks understand those rules, what the obligations are, but doing it in a kind and thoughtful and informative way to help get to a solution. As a building official, John is continually training on new codes as well as how to improve and increase affordability and energy efficiency in projects. In the recognition by the Oregon Building Officials Association, they stated their appreciation for John as an individual and for his work in leading his team, for the exceptional technical knowledge, hard work and tireless efforts, and personable professionalism. That's the alchemy, if you will, the combination of all those great things that we're looking for. You treat everyone with kindness and respect and should know you are respected tremendously by all who know you. So it's just my personal pleasure, and on behalf of our organization, our great privilege to recognize you, John, for your great work. And Keir, I want to ask Keir Miller, a land management division manager, is John's supervisor, offer you to say some words as well.
Sure. Thank you, Steve, and good morning, commissioners. I really can't beat you there. I mean, that was an outstanding summary of John's traits and abilities, and it can be hard to beat your thunder. I will just reiterate that John is, he's been at the county 7 years. He's been a building official since 2022, so a fairly short time, but it's just really impressed me so much and his entire team, especially with his, as been mentioned, his technical knowledge. But more than that, just his kindness, his calmness, his ability to talk with the public who are having a challenging time, not understanding something. He just brings it down to their level and can really talk through some complicated things, which is a real skill. And all the building officials I've worked with over the years, that is like, you can't train that, and John has that in spades. So I really appreciate that. I know he's just so highly respected by his team, and he's respected by me, and I just want to thank him very much for his service.
Well, John, your favorite part of this whole thing is you get to listen to some comments more from the county commissioners on you. So just sit back and relax, my friend. Is there any comments from our colleagues? Yes, Commissioner Trujillo.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'll just kick us off. And we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, but clearly from everything I'm hearing, you're someone I should meet and talk to. And I just want to offer personal appreciation. What was communicated about how what you do is sort of translate the work of government to the folks that are interacting with it is the most important thing you can do in representing this organization and the work, is to make it accessible to people in a way that works for them. So thank you for doing that and for being here for such a short amount of time and get this kind of recognition from your association in the state level speaks volumes. So thank you very much for choosing Lane County.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. John, thank you for all your good work. You know, I tend to get a lot of calls from people who are doing land use issues on the my side of the district, and you know, it's really complicated, and knowing all those rules is a lot of work, and I know that people can get frustrated, but your exceptional professionalism is so highly regarded and really appreciated. Thank you for taking the time with people and knowing that it's not personal. Your job is to ensure the health and safety of our public first and foremost, and that I think is so well worth it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Farr.
Thank you. John, you and I have not actually met. Howdy. Please. You know, in a past life, I trained a lot of people on retail, and one of the first things I always told them is the customer is always right. Now, I also follow that up with, we don't believe that, but our job is to guide and advise in such a manner as to make them feel that they are right. By all accounts, that's what you do, John, and there's no finer praise that I can give you to that. You understand customer service. You understand that while the customer isn't always right, you don't want them to walk away letting them think that you told them they're wrong. And I don't believe that you do. Good job.
Mr.
Yes. John, we have met. And we have toured some, I'm going to say, awkward places that have needed a lot of work. And so my experience with you is personal when we're taking different phone calls. And the way you handle yourself in public in some of these tough situations is not something that comes natural for everybody. And I measure this in phone calls. The phone calls in the last 2 years, from when I started to the difference you've made in 2 years, is huge. And I want to thank you for that. And this is, I'm being sincere. Part of that stability that you're bringing to that department doesn't come natural for everybody. I can assure you of that. And I think you are going to continue to be a great hearings official, and I truly appreciate you sitting in that position because I know it's a tough spot. Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot more accolades. And you got more than anyone in the state, John. Well, congratulations. That's quite a heralded achievement. That doesn't usually come out in the news that people read, so appreciate you doing that. John, you're the face of the people of Lane County. You are Lane County's face, and what people have been saying about you and the way you do your job is that you're putting the best face of Lane County forward, and that's something that is a tall order, especially when you're in the face of people that may disagree or couldn't even be hostile or even feel like they're not being heard. So having that kind of grace and professionalism and balance is something that we really value as a county and as an employer, and we're so glad to have you here. It's been said on the street that you are a solution-oriented man. And so I just want to say thank you for working for the solutions that sometimes can be a real challenge. And sometimes there aren't the solutions that people want, but you find the ones that are true and the ones that we can do. So I certainly appreciate that. And then obviously that bridge that you do with the public about this challenging circumstances, keep that up. Hopefully we'll smooth that out and we'll get better at what we do. So again, thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts and our colleagues. Well done, and we'll appreciate it. Thank you, John. All right, next up on our agenda is our public testimony comments period. Public can speak here in person at Harris Hall or online. The time is limited to 3 minutes. We will ask that you please watch the clock on the screen over here and stop at the 3-minute mark so we can be fair to all. You can also submit public comments via our website in writing at least 24 hours ahead of our meeting to be included in the weekly meeting packet. We respect your First Amendment rights as a tool to address your government with grievances and opinions, but we also admonish to all to do so in a civil manner and to be respectful in expressing yourself. When you come to the podium, please state your name for the record, and your time will begin. And we'll start on the list with Cora Kent, followed by Nancy Gallagher. So, please. Is it Nora or Cora? I'm Nora, I apologize. Sorry.
Good morning, esteemed county commissioners. I'm Nora Kent. I'm from Florence in Mr. Senega's purview area. And first of all, before I read this declaration that I have, I want to thank you for the work that you've already been doing on making Lane County a sanctuary county. I attended the last county, well, one a couple weeks ago, and I listened to the presentation from the Department of Justice, and it was really informative and helpful. So there's a few of us in Florence that created a declaration that I'd like to read to you. And we gathered about 125 signatures. We, the people of the Florence area and Lane County, declare that we are in full support of the Oregon Sanctuary Promise Act, which requires our local public bodies and law enforcement to create a county in which all are kept safe and treated with dignity and respect, regardless of immigration status. This declaration is to make sure all public bodies comply with state law and do not use limited local resources to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement unless they have an authorized judicial warrant. It is our strong desire to make Lane County a sanctuary county. We further ask all our local officials and law enforcement to reaffirm their commitment to following Oregon sanctuary's laws by providing timely and appropriate training to their staff and promoting information to the public about their civil rights should they be arrested or detained. Signed this day, January 18th, 2025. So I have a blank copy of this, and I guess I leave everything up here?
Yes, around that table would be great.
Right there. And I also had to share from Rural Organizing Project regarding a hotline number for and an explanation of the Sanctuary Promise Act. Okay. Thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you so much. Nancy Gallagher, followed by Bill Compton, please.
Hello, Commissioners. My name's Nancy Gallagher. I'm the rector of St. John the Divine, the Episcopal Church in Springfield, because we're the only Episcopal Church in Springfield. We understand, Chair Commissioner Lovell, that you may have received some feedback between last meeting and this meeting about talking about that we are a nation founded on Christian values. I think with the rise of Christian nationalism, that the rhetoric around all that, which in my opinion isn't Christian, and it's in name only, and it's not Christian in values, I believe that our protection of religious freedom is threatened. Our Jewish and Muslim neighbors have been subject to increased hate and threats of violence. And while many of the founding fathers identified as Christian, it wasn't, they didn't hold uniform understandings, and they also held some understandings that were actually inaccurate, like women can vote, only white people are really people. You know, you took that history course. So I want to be really clear that there is room here in Lane County for many diverse opinions, and that's not something that we should just accept. I think that's something that we should celebrate. And Commissioner Lovell, your campaign says love all for all. And I think that leads me to believe that we can ask you to be vigilant in your support of religious freedom for all. And that we can ask all of you to be vigilant to everyone who looks to you to uphold their dignity in their identity and in their safety. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Bill Compton, followed by Ron Shaheen.
Good morning. My name is Bill Compton, and I've served Lane County for over 40 years serving the young people. And I'm thankful to be here once again. It was 2 years ago in May that I was here, and I gave you a word of encouragement. And my word of encouragement today is to excel still more and more. I love that great quote. After nearly 2 years, as I said, I've heard speeches and meetings and grand ideas and task force committees. I love to watch you online. Two-dimensional is great. It gives me freedom to do other things as well. But the will of the people of Lane County has still not been addressed. You, the commissioners of Lane County, have been called and chosen to represent Lane County and the will of its people. I think I'm correct in that. The Lane County administrator is your hired employee to administrate and orchestrate with eagerness and responsibility to do and direct the substantial and substantially fulfill the will of the people. The strategic plan of 2022, 2024 clearly communicated through the survey that it was built from, that the will of the people in Lane County, the #1 strategic priority was to secure sustained funding for public safety. And I have this with, and you have it available. I shared with you May of 2 years ago. This mandate by the good people of Lane County remains unfulfilled. The Lane County Sheriff's Office remains critically understaffed, and growing burden and increased need for public safety continues to go unanswered, to the point of doing a stopgap measure so that we would not have 3 hours every day uncovered. And that was coming, but now because of increased overtime for those who are presently Lane County deputies, overburdened, and in relationship to other police services, underpaid. These men and women, these brave men and women, continue to do a job. But if you know anything about stress and work-related situations, they may not be doing the job most effectively. Will the safety continued to be unanswered? Will your legacy be one of not fulfilling that priority #1 of that strategic plan? On behalf of the citizens of Lane County, I charge you once again and ask you to excel still more and more, to prioritize the fiduciary responsibility that you have to public safety instead of spending millions of dollars on other projects that are not mandated and not the priority. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Next up is Ron Shaheen. Please correct me, followed by David Eigel.
Good morning. My name is Ron Shaheen. I would just like to comment on Commissioner Lovell's comment from last meeting about This nation was founded upon a principle of Christian foundation. The U.S. was not founded on Christian principles. The U.S. Constitution does not establish Christianity as the official religion. In fact, as we all know, the First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That means the free exercise of all religions, any religion, even no religion. Nowhere in the Constitution do the words God, Jesus Christ, or Christianity appear. The leaders of the American Revolution and the New Republic held a mix of beliefs, some Christian, some Unitarian, some deistic, some agnostic. Some key founders like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson admired Jesus as a moral teacher, but not the Son of God. One need look no further than the Treaty of Tripoli, negotiated under George Washington, unanimously approved by the Senate in 1797 and signed by President John Adams. That treaty states, quote, "The government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." Thank you.
Good, thank you. David Eigel, followed by R.S. Rubenstein.
Good morning, David Eigel. I've asked each of you to contact the U of O President's Office and asked to see a copy of the so-called irrefutable evidence that this office claims to possess that proves that Professor Frederick Dunn was the local exalted Cyclops in 1920. The only Commissioner Traeger has overtly refused to do so. Yet Lane County, the History Museum has proposed lies about Professor Dunn and many other Lane County residents, including the Episcopal minister Frederick Jennings, who actually, as a Eugene School Board member, defended the Catholic employees. President Schultz doesn't have any such proof. Had Dunn, one of the most prominent men in the Eugene community, been the local leader in a community of only a little over 10,000 residents, it would have been well known for many reasons. Not the least of these would be that former KKK members would have discussed his leadership or even membership. Professor Dunn's status as the exalted Cyclops, or even being active with the Knights, was completely unknown because he wasn't the exalted Cyclops or active with the KKK. The story didn't appear in history until 1992, when it was fabricated and published by Eckhart Tolle. It didn't appear in the 1920s when the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan Fraternal Order had a chapter here. No mention of this was made in 1937 when Professor Dunn's death was front page news around the state of Oregon, and Dunn was lionized as being widely beloved, and his useful life of service was noted and honored by many, including then U of O President Valentine Boyer. No mention was made of this in '62 when Dunn Hall was dedicated at the request of noted civil rights activist, U of O President Arthur Fleming. Had Dunn actually been the local exalted Cyclops, there never would have been a Dunn Hall dedicated in the civil rights conscious environment of the 1962 U of O campus. There are only two pieces of evidence that exist that have been used to establish that Dunn was the local exalted Cyclops. They've been discredited. For example, Dean Sheldon's letter expresses Sheldon's laughter at those who were lying about Dunn being the local chapter chairman. Sheldon called it a silly, wild rumor. Commissioners, please state publicly or privately why you would be unwilling to merely ask a question about this matter of the President's office. Please do this. I ask you. I'm only asking you to ask a question. It's our history. People are entitled to truth. And a lot of lies are being spread around, and I've documented these lies. And I'd like to see some action taken, because I'm taking action now with wide distribution of information, so those who have been naughty and those who have been nice are going to be recorded. Thank you.
Thank you. R.S. Rubenstein, followed by Andrew Langford, please.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you so much for your service to this county. I'm Rabbi Ruchi Sophia Motzkin Rubenstein. I am the Rabbi of Temple Beth Israel here in Eugene and the current co-chair of Interfaith Clergy United, a monthly convening of local interfaith clergy. And while, like some others in this gallery, I also felt dismay at the chair's use of his position to express a particular religious vision for the nation, I am confident that Chair Lovell is capable of receiving and accepting feedback and moving forward using the appropriate use of his current position. As a clergy person in this community, I don't want the distress and distrust that has arisen from Commissioner Lovell's preaching to distract from the original reasons that so many have been gathering here at these meetings, which is to ask for the county leader's protection and service to those who are most marginalized, those most demonized, most under attack, and whose lives and livelihoods have been put at risk by often illegal executive orders coming out of the federal administration. And I refer specifically to our trans and immigrant community members. So I do want to continue to focus the conversation and my request, speaking as myself and the many people that I try to serve, to the commissioners, that you continue to work on trans and gender affirming healthcare, making sure that the county is adequately staffed to provide resources to our trans community members and to our immigrant community members who are feeling very much at risk right now. Thank you, commissioners, for the good work you do.
Thank you, Rabbi. Next up is Andrew Langford, followed by Jacob Griffin.
Morning. My name is Andrew Langford, as you pointed out. I serve as a Christian minister here in Eugene at Emmaus Lutheran Church. I'd like to begin by thanking the board for their work on behalf of all the people of Lane County. Your service to our community is appreciated. I'm here today as a private citizen, but also as a faith leader of a Lutheran church, to express as clearly as I can how imperative I believe it is that the Board of Commissioners do everything in its power to support and uphold the dignity and rights of every member of our community, especially our trans and immigrant neighbors, friends, and family members. I emphasize every member of our community deliberately, because we all rely upon equal treatment under the law, but I'm keenly aware that some of us are more likely to be treated fairly, even preferentially. As a white cisgender man and a Christian within a historically Christian majority culture, traditionally I have had little concern that I or my values might be targeted. But today, I do feel as though my Christian values are under attack by President Trump and his administration. The recent shutdown of USAID, which helps millions of people around the world receive basic medical and food services, is contrary to my Christian values. Mike Flynn and Elon Musk's recent attack on Lutheran nonprofits that provide life-saving aid to immigrants and refugees, as well as social services to 1 in 50 Americans, like resources for victims of domestic abuse, is contrary to my Christian values, as well as the values of many of my siblings of other faiths or no faiths at all. There are more to list, but you might reasonably be wondering, what does this have to do with you, our duly elected commissioners here in Lane County? My appeal to you is to discharge the duties of your office with impartiality and compassion. I know I speak alongside many concerned faith leaders in Lane County when I say that we will be vigilant in our expectation that the Board of Commissioners stands firmly on the side of our neighbors and our community members, especially those who are under direct threat right now: immigrants, trans, and other gender-expansive people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up is Jacob Griffin, followed by Amanda Noble Flannery.
Good morning, commissioners. Every week I say I'm not going to speak, and then I speak. I don't know what that says. Something about my ego, I suspect. Today I'm going to talk about what I think matters to all of us, no matter what our religious faith or non-faith is, and that's the children in our community. I want to talk specifically about trans children and immigrant children and what's been happening in the last few weeks to those people because of the actions of our government. We have young trans people that I can speak specifically to who are going to be denied the medical care that is going to allow them to get to adulthood without harm. Puberty blockers take care of children and allow them the time to decide what they want to do with their bodies before biology overcomes and doesn't allow them to have the bodies and the life they choose. And our government is taking away that life-saving measure from our children. We are going to see suicides, we are going to see deep harm, and most of all, they are learning the lesson that their government hates them, hates who they are, hates their bodies, hates what they want to be and need to be. And I can't speak for immigrant children in the same way, but I suspect they're getting the same message, that we don't love them, that we don't care for them, that we are not going to protect them from harm. And this is not acceptable. If you don't like trans people, if you don't care about immigrants, at least care about the children. At least care about the message you're sending our youngest residents about who their government is, what it means to them, and what care it will provide for them. This is essential to me. And I cannot imagine a religious or spiritual practice that does not focus on care of children. And so if for nothing else, I ask you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Amanda Noble Flannery, followed by Brad Neuschwander.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Amanda Noble Flannery. My pronouns are she, her. I'm speaking today as a Lane County resident. I live in Eugene. As I've shared in my previous public comments, I'm here advocating for immigrant and trans protections in light of the recent abhorrent federal executive orders. Thank you for continuing to listen to us week after week. Today, I want to specifically talk about the county's website and social statement from last week that clarifies that no changes to service, including at health centers, related to the executive orders and rulemaking. It says, Lane County continues to comply with federal and state law. Please remember state law prohibits local governments and law enforcement agencies from sharing information with federal agencies regarding immigration enforcement without a signed judicial order. Lane County continues to ensure all medical privacy laws are enforced to the fullest extent of the law. While I appreciate the public support, what stands out to me is this reassurance is dependent on laws Lane County does not control. What happens if the laws change, as the federal administration is aiming to do, in ways that are not aligned with our state and community values? That same website statement also says, quote, we are guided by values regularly reaffirmed over the past 25 years by the Board of County Commissioners as part of our strategic plan: integrity, excellence, equity, and respect, end quote. What will happen if the laws you're relying on to be aligned with county values and keep us safe change? This is the question we need you to consider, and know that assurances that you'll follow the law are not reassuring given the federal executive orders and anticipated rulemaking. It is not enough to say, as long as it is legal to protect you, we will. We need leadership willing to do more than that. Yes, a lot would be at risk, but more is in jeopardy if we decide full rights aren't necessary for certain community members. There comes a time when we must dare to defy. We need our county to lead, to stand in the values that we have and have reaffirmed. We need your action and bravery to protect us from the federal government's onslaught on our rights. Embracing the fullness and variety in our community is essential. Being ourselves is not a crime, it is a gift. The time for action is now. Thank you.
Up next is Brad Neuschwander, followed by Anna Lander.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's great to see each of you. Thank you for your service. I just wanted to share as a resident of outlying rural communities that, first of all, I appreciate people that are willing to serve the public and to take comments and to give their lives for serving the greater good of our county. And I want to thank you for that. I'm just reminded as a citizen here, as we look at the general health care in our city, I've experienced personally the loss of 5 doctors in the last 3 years. I've watched people losing medical assistance, and I'm not talking on behalf of, I'm talking long-term residents that can't get into see doctors or therapists. I had a hamstring pulled severely. It was 4 months for the nearest physical therapist. By that time, the hamstring is pretty much healed. I would encourage you guys and gals to, I hear all the comments today about areas of our community, but I want to just say, let's look at the whole and recognize that we need to do something to keep doctors and therapists here in this town. I appreciate all that you do. I would also just say, as a local resident and citizen, that I would be a firm believer in praying for all people. And the scripture that I go by says that you would pray for all people in authority. And that's really what my job is as a citizen, is to pray for you guys and to say, give them wisdom, give them understanding, help them navigate the course that we have of issues that are near and dear to our community. But I would just encourage, as the gentleman came up to talk about police safety, I would echo his sentiment and say, let's look at what we can do to keep some doctors and practitioners in this area, because they have left by the droves in the last 2 years. Thank you. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you. Last up in Harris Hall would be Anna Lander, and then we'll go to the online.
Good morning, everyone. Anna Lardner. My N's look like R's. I apologize for that. My pronouns are she, her. I want to echo the statements made by a lot of the speakers today, particularly the really heartfelt showing by members of the faith-based community, which was really well received, and I really thank you all for showing up. I also want to give a personal thank you to Commissioner Lovall for the apology this morning. Religion does not have a place at the public dais. I understand that you have First Amendment views, and I honor and cherish those. That said, when you're on that dais, you represent Lane County, and it takes a very strong and confident leader to apologize for their mistakes, and I want to thank you for doing that this morning, and I hope that that course gets stayed. In addition to what was said today, I actually want to speak to a specific budget item today, which is the grant that's being considered for parole and probation. I am a former PO. I was a domestic violence parole officer for 7 years. I left to pursue a career in dancing. I still have good relationships with a lot of the members of the parole and probation community. I want you all, when you speak with Director Kreisha Brunsman today, as well as Greg Rickoff, to ensure that accepting this federal grant is not a poisoned pill. The reason I say this is because there have been executive orders that have specifically said that federal grants shall not support gender ideology. The federal order that Trump signed 2 weeks ago, defending women from gender ideology and restoring biological truth to the federal government, specified that they define gender ideology as replacing the biological category of sex with an ever-shifting concept of self-assessed gender identity, among other definitions. It further says that federal funds shall not be used to promote gender ideology. Parole and probation is now considering a grant from the Federal Department of Justice. I didn't see a copy of that grant application and its certifications in the materials today. I would encourage all of you, I would encourage Mr. Moker-Heisky, and I would encourage Mr. Rickoff and Ms. Brunsman to ensure that the language of that grant does not prohibit Lane County and Lane County Parole and Probation from supporting those who have diverse gender identities. There are many members of Lane County's Parole and Probation supervised community who are trans, who are gender diverse. That grant is designed to help parole and probation reduce recidivism for those who are being served by the mental health unit. We know that many gender diverse and trans individuals struggle with mental health. I know for a fact there are many trans folk who are in that mental health unit as clients that I have worked with personally over the years when I served alongside PO Michelle Larson, PO Jenna Lee Nichols, PO, and a bunch of other POs who are in there. please make sure that that grant doesn't prohibit Lane County and Lane County Parole and Probation from acknowledging the gender realities of those that it serves. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, Jess, to the online portal, do we have any hands raised for public comment there?
Thank you, Chair. For those members of the public joining us virtually, if you would like to give public comment, please raise your virtual hand now. And I do see a hand raised. Joe Tyndall, would you like to be on camera?
Hello?
Hi, Joe. Would you like to also be on camera?
No.
You may go ahead and begin your public comment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Joe Tyndall. First, the federal government is defunding the woke so-called social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion religion. Well, it needs to do the same. Future hiring and promotion should be based on merit rather than on race, gender, or politics. Qualification standards reductions for DEI candidates must end. Failure to stop woke DEI practices will likely result in the withholding of federal funds. Second, sanctuary jurisdictions obstructing deportation of migrants, particularly those having committed crimes, are also likely to see federal funds sequestered, along with indictments for administrators harboring lawbreakers. Do you really want to go there? Third, Lane County is named in the lawsuit demanding that voter rolls be cleaned. This is case number 6:24-CV-01783-MC. Since I first raised this issue in October, cleaning the voting rolls has not appeared on your agenda. Why is that? While voting by mail is convenient, Oregon's system maximizes opportunities for fraud. In bygone days, with a few accommodations for valid absentees, all voting and counting was done at the precinct with an ID required on one day using paper ballots and with observers present at all times. Every precinct knew its final totals as a check against systemic corruption. Under the current system, ballot collection has been removed from public view. Every ineligible voter still on the rolls after they move or die is an opportunity for a fraudulent ballot. Every person with a non-voting history, including those put on the rolls by the DMV, is an opportunity for a fraudulent ballot. Note that voter signatures are available to election workers wearing a hidden camera. Over my lifetime, because powerful forces benefit, elections have become increasingly hackable. Election rigging confers power. Being caught is unlikely, so corruption is nearly guaranteed. Will Lane County clean its voter lists as required by law, or will the courts force your hand? I will wager that when the list of purgeable names on the county rolls is generated, many of these folks will have had unlawful ballots cast for them. Are any of you willing to take this bet? Enough damage from stolen elections. Do your sworn duty to the Constitution. Clean the voter rolls. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Jessica?
See no further hands raised. This concludes the virtual public comment.
Okay, this concludes our public comment period of the agenda, and it's time now for our commissioners to have some remonstrance and some comments. So I open up the field to the first one who wants to volunteer. Vice Chair.
On the second look, I'm up. Thank you, Chair. And also, thank you to Nora for coming in from Florence, I believe it was. That's a long drive. There's some inclement weather out there, and we've had snow on the passes, so that shows to me how important this public comment is to you. As I did last week, I would assure to you that the public comment is that important to me. It was stated a couple weeks ago, and I reiterated last week that love everybody with a whole heart. And it was stated today that we have lots of room for Lane County for everybody, and that is something to celebrate. If you think about it, that is completely true, and something that I believe in and will continue to believe in. As was mentioned, we had a presentation from the DOJ and our Sheriff's Department. And I thought our governor put out a great press release stating the sanctuary laws in Oregon, and I believe those are strong and intact. Another thing I saw or heard this morning that I wrote down, and I want to assure, is I will continue to serve with impartiality and compassion. I believe that's our job up here. So, thank you. Bill Compton, thank you for everything you do, Thin Blue Line. You guys are doing a great job, and I really respect the way you've taken our police officers, public health, public safety, looked at their side of things, because it is a stressful job. All you have to do is go ride around with them for 10 hours and see what they go through. So thank you for everything you're doing also. That's it, Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming, for taking the time to be here. I think it's really notable that we've consistently had more people showing up in person for public comment since the turn of the calendar page into January than in the entirety of my service here so far on a consistent basis. So thank you all. I think it also speaks to the seriousness of the time that we're in when folks are so concerned about such fundamental basic human rights and their ability to be safe and to thrive, that they're coming out week in and week out to share that message with us. I hear you loud and clear. I think particularly, I can't address everyone in turn, but Jacob, when you talked about people who hate trans kids, I am concerned even more so, which is they don't even see the humanity and therefore feel entitled to use people's identity or immigration status as a tool to leverage their own power and feed their own ideology. And so this dehumanization that we're seeing of some of the most marginalized, vulnerable, and at-risk human beings among us is deeply concerning to me. And I know many of you here share that. I also can't help but notice week in and week out that many of you come to the podium and mention the grave threats against folks who are immigrants to this country, documented and undocumented, or folks who may look like they might be immigrants. It's deeply concerning, and so it's really important to notice who's not in the room. I think that is something I will always attend to and consider and have great awareness of. Amanda, you asked, what happens if laws change? It's an important, I don't know if you're still here. It's an important question. Laws change all the time, and sometimes those laws change in a way that provides greater protection and justice, and sometimes those laws change in the other direction. And so we always have to ask, what do we do if laws change? And we are part of making law. I'm really grateful to not only our governor, but our attorney general, who are standing strong with a protective stance against many of these potential federal mandates. And I would just say the stating of a law or an intention of a law or a concept of a law doesn't make the law enforced yet. So it's also our job to have the discernment of what is actually currently law and how we respond. So I can't answer your question, what happens if laws change, because they actually haven't as yet in a way that we know what we're responding to. But for myself, and I know at the staff level, there is a team that is monitoring changes coming out of the federal government, both regulatory and funding-wise and otherwise, to see what is the impact on us so we can respond at the appropriate time with the appropriate measure. And finally, speaking of laws changing, I want to just acknowledge that February is Black History Month still. That, in fact, it started in 1976 under President Gerald Ford, who designated Black History Month, and he said he did it to, quote, seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout History Month. So thank you to President Ford for doing that back in 1976, and I just want to say that Black history is American history, and American history is Black history, for better or worse. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning as well. Thank you for coming out on an early Tuesday morning. We appreciate your time, and I appreciate hearing from each and every one of you. Many of you spoke on trans and immigration rights, as we've heard for several public comment sessions so far. And again, I remain an ally and a staunch supporter of making sure that we continue to protect our most vulnerable in our community. So you can count on me for that. Many others also referenced the rise of white nationalism in our country, comments that were made at our last board meeting by our chair regarding religion. I find it deeply disturbing that in order to participate as your commissioner, as our staff, to participate in our meetings, and the audience to be able to participate in the act of governance with the Board of County Commissioners, we continue to have a chair that invokes a particular religion, his God, or asks us to pray on the dais. I find this a challenge to the separation of church and state and the Establishment Clause, as has been mentioned in our public comment. This needs to discontinue. We need to remain impartial. The business of the county is at this dais, and that is what we should be focused on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I have a couple of things to say. You know, last week I asked for one of these, and one of you gave it to me. In fact, two of you did. But this one in particular stood out to me, and I'll tell you why in a second. As my wife and I, Debbie and I, prepare for our 50th anniversary and our 25th year in the same house, we're going through a lot of boxes that we've not opened, some of them in 25 years. And a lot of them have sheets of paper, 8.5 by 11, bigger, that are like this. And on those sheets of paper are the same kind of notations that I see on the back of this sheet of paper, written by a little tiny hand, probably in the first grade, kindergarten, whatever it may be. And on the back of this heart it says, "Taked upon numder." No clue what that means, but I know that was written by a little hand and given to whoever cut this heart out, who gave this heart to me. Thank you for giving me this heart. Because, you know, I'm not the only person, even in this room, who's an immigrant. I'm not the only person who has multicultural grandchildren. I'm not the only person that has trans children and trans grandchildren, but I am that person. It's easier for you to understand when your loved ones tell you how they feel than when strangers tell you how they feel. Much, much easier. That doesn't lessen our responsibility to try to understand what strangers are saying that is more difficult to understand than when our loved ones, when our little ones tell us what they believe. As we move forward, Amanda Noble Flannery, you said, being ourselves is not a crime, it is a gift. I wrote that down. Might make a badge out of that, because being ourselves is not a crime. It's not a gift. And making certain that we here in Lane County are able to help people continue to be themselves, continue to live the fullest life that they possibly can without hindrance of legislation or rules that take that right away from them. I stand behind that. Watch my actions, don't listen to my words. That being said, you know, the U.S. Constitution was ratified in 1788, and only 3 years later they started fixing it with the First Amendment. The First Amendment was ratified in 1791, 3 years after the U.S. Constitution. They started right away, and the First Amendment, Mr. Shaheen, Ron Shaheen, you cited the First Amendment, and that was the first thing that they amended was the discussion regarding religion, freedom of religion, et cetera. And I'm not going to go into details of what the First Amendment specifically says or how it was ratified throughout the states, but it was the first thing, the first fix to the U.S. Constitution. Very important fix to the U.S. Constitution. It's something that we all stand behind, we all should stand behind. And Rabbi Rubenstein, you said we should be capable and willing of hearing and acting on feedback. We all should be capable and willing to act and respond to feedback. Thank you for that. One last thing I wanted to say, and that is regarding something that happened last night. It was pretty cold last night, and St. Vincent de Paul has opened their warehouse in the evenings to supplement the a place for people to go when it's for homeless people in particular to go when it's really cold. I really want to commend St. Vincent de Paul for welcoming people, the unhoused, into the heated warehouse. It's a large heated warehouse, not comfortable. Yeah, it's not the Ritz that we're talking about here, but it's a place where people can stay warm at night. And thank you, St. Vincent de Paul, for taking that step and doing that. And to all the volunteers who are helping with the Egan shelters and who are helping with St. Vincent de Paul and helping people who otherwise would be either suffering or, in some cases, facing death or near death based on the cold nights. So really the 200 volunteers, the facility that shelters over 200 people, thank you, St. Vincent de Paul. Thank you for the volunteers for doing that. And finally, Ms. Mograxi, I am our representative to the statutory Mental Health Advisory Committee. I've been that representative to that committee for 13 years now. Recently, that committee reminded me that I, as the representative, am their champion and need to be the champion of the things that they believe should be addressed in policy by this Board of Commissioners to make certain that people who are suffering from or adjacent to behavioral health issues are receiving the kind of treatment that they need. They have acknowledged recently that our work on Sanctuary County is something that helps people to receive the treatment that they need to address behavioral health issues. You'll hear more from our Mental Health Advisory Committee on that. That's not a specific task of the Mental Health Advisory Committee to talk about Sanctuary, but they do believe that it is a part of the necessary work that we do on behavioral health, among other things. So you'll hear more about that. So thanks for your comments this morning.
Thank you, colleagues. I echo many of the appreciations for people that coming out here as well. I want to just say that I want to bless you all for coming and providing constructive comments. I'm taking them all to heart, and I'm looking forward to what becomes better communication in the very near future. I think the thing that I was most critical on coming into office, and in fact my pastor could probably tell you, is that the participation in the faith-based community in government was lacking. And so I am encouraged today, honestly, to see many people from many facets of the faith-based community involved in their government, because I think it's critical that that involvement happens in government. And so I'm encouraged that you've done this, and I want to thank you. But I also am encouraged that you're willing to come this morning to fight for what all of us are fighting for, and that's to be included. And that's for everybody's opinion, everyone's faith, everyone's stance, and everyone's life experiences to be included in how we decide how we live in this country. And so I appreciate you doing that, and I'm excited to move forward. So thank you again. That concludes our public testimony comment period. We're going to move on to our consent calendar. All items are listed here are considered routine by the Board of Commissioners and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed in the agenda. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent calendar and would have been considered separately. Do I have a motion for the consent calendar?
Chair, I move to approve the consent calendar for February 4th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Guess not.
I'll second.
Thank you for the second. It's been motioned by Vice Chair the consent calendar and seconded. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0. On to Health and Human Services. Eve Gray is coming to the table. Thank you so much, Director Gray, for being here, and our apologies again for moving you a week later. But we're excited to hear what you have to say. So, Mr. Mokraski, if you wouldn't mind introducing the topic, if you wish, and we can move
Yes,
forward.
thank you, Chair. This item, we moved from last week to this week to accommodate last week's schedule. So our Director of Health and Human Services, Eve Gray, is here to give you an update on our Emergency Medical Services Task Force, which we've talked to the board in the past about. So trying to get your presentation up.
Yes, it'll happen.
We trust you.
You know.
It is happening. It's happening.
Except it is
It's biggie sized.
difficult for me to, there we go, look at that. Okay, challenge number 1 of the day averted. Hello, commissioners, and I wanted to come back and give you an update on a presentation that I was here, I believe, in October to give you some information on EMS funding and its impact, particularly on the city of Oak Ridge, as well as a recommendation to form another joint elected task force regarding funding for EMS services in Lane County. So here today to update you on the status so far and recommend a couple of changes to the process compared to what we were thinking in the fall. And let me see if for some reason it's cutting off the bottom a little bit, but hopefully, there we go. So just the background, the history for anyone who wasn't watching in October, the board authorized staff to begin work to form a joint elected task force to look at EMS funding sustainability. At the time, Oak Ridge EMS was really, really struggling and on the verge of collapse. All EMS providers in Lane County, however, were recognized to face similar funding challenges to those of Oak Ridge. Just the scope and the scale of that hasn't hit yet most of the providers in the community to the same extent as Oak Ridge. And we recognized that these funding challenges stem from limitations that are set both federally and at a state level on Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement. So the way that healthcare systems work typically is that you're managing payer mix. Medicare and Medicaid don't pay the bills, commercial insurers pay the bills, and eventually it works out to a small margin. In the EMS system, there are very few commercial patients in that system compared to many of the other healthcare systems, which means a very high percentage of folks are in that category of payers who don't pay the cost of service. And that is the root cause of the funding challenges and unsustainability for EMS funding. So the county, as a reminder for why are we involved? We have a responsibility for identifying ambulance service areas and contracting with ambulance or authorizing the contracting with any ambulance services within the county. So we set the service areas for which different EMS agencies operate, and then we identify which agency is going to be able to operate in which service area. The oversight of ambulance services is a core function of the Lane County Board of Commissioners with assistance from me, so you're not alone, but this is a core function that you have. And should any part of our local ambulance system fail, Lane County is responsible for identifying an alternative, and that is a statutory requirement. So where are we now? All 5 Lane County fire chiefs have agreed to participate. They all got back to me within days of the request going out. All of them are feeling the pressure around the funding challenges. 3 of the 5 fire chiefs have confirmed membership that they would like to nominate to the Board of County Commissioners for the task force. Of course, when you are forming a task force, you also approve the members of that task force. And we have chosen a facilitator for the task force. That will be Brenda Moore from LCOG, and she is also facilitating some joint work with City of Eugene and Springfield Fire and EMS, and has deep knowledge and understanding of the challenges within the EMS system, how local providers are working together, and she also said that her services are included in the price of our LCOG membership. So that was a very good price as well.
Tough negotiator.
I know. So some concerns that we have uncovered as we've been looking to populate our task force. Springfield and Eugene, as I mentioned, Brenda Moore has been facilitating a current joint elected task force related to their consolidation. So Eugene and Springfield are partially consolidated, not fully consolidated. And that has led to a number of administrative challenges related to differing bargaining units, differing policies and procedures from the municipalities that govern the services. So there are ongoing discussions within a joint elected task force today to figure out what the future of that consolidation looks like and how to do that most effectively for the municipalities. And there's a sense amongst at least some of the stakeholders in those groups that if we start to discuss a countywide solution prior to the two cities coming to a conclusion regarding the future of their consolidation, that it could potentially create a kind of differing pathways or a differing set of recommendations. And also the ability of elected officials in particular to participate in two task forces concurrently was thought to be particularly burdensome for the volunteer members of those committees, as many of the city elected leaders are. So we're wanting to pivot a little bit in order to address these concerns, to make sure that everyone feels like their voices can be heard at the table, they have the capacity to participate, and that they have voice in the local governance models as well as anything that occurs countywide. The other pieces, so we're going to go back to what the recommended solution is, which, spoiler alert, is a bit of a delay in this process. But the concern was what happens to Oak Ridge, right? Because Oak Ridge was in trouble in October and before October. So worked with Lane Community Health Council to identify $400,000 for Oak Ridge Fire and EMS in order to close their fiscal gap for this year and part of next fiscal year, and essentially stabilize them for a period of time that was going to allow us to work more collaboratively as an entire county and with all of the fire districts together. So in speaking with Oak Ridge, there was an agreement and an understanding around the fact that it might be helpful for us to pace this work a little bit, pace it behind the work with Eugene and Springfield Fire and EMS, and that this funding that we were able to identify that the Health Council very graciously allocated will allow for that delay to happen without catastrophic consequences in Oak Ridge. So we are also working with other partners to see can we do more for Oak Ridge, knowing that they may need some more support in order to get us through this entire process. So we're continuing those conversations with others in the community as well. So what are we recommending in terms of slight changes? Rather than beginning the task force in this late winter to early spring, we are now recommending that we begin the joint elected task force in June of 2025. This will give us then the summer to ramp up the committee, get everybody educated, because of course there's a lot of foundation building that has to happen in a task force like this. And really probably it'll be the beginning of the fall where we're starting to talk about potential solutions or things that we might be able to pursue as a county in order to make a more stable system. That felt like a better timeline when talking with our municipal partners, particularly in Springfield, felt like a better timeline. And I mentioned that Brenda Moore will be the facilitator. That also feels good to the folks who are currently engaged in this work, that we're going to have someone who has a deep understanding of the challenges, on all levels, who will be continuing and creating continuity of this work, and that we will discuss any solutions at a county level in the context of the municipal agreements that will be made as part of the Eugene and Springfield task forces. So just trying to make sure that we're making this process as inclusive and supportive as possible. So certainly looking for any feedback that you have on this plan, and ultimately hope for your approval for the delayed start of that task force, which would mean I would come back to you probably early May timeframe with the names of folks who will be on the task force. Of course, we know that Commissioner Buck will be the representative from the Lane County Board of Commissioners, but then wanting to make sure that we get all of those folks approved by you in May so that we can get something on the schedule starting in June. We will also be monitoring state and federal activity regarding EMS funding. There's not a ton in this legislative session right now. There are a couple of bills that we're keeping an eye on, which could potentially have an impact. But the fundamental challenge of payer mix is one that remains. We will, of course, finish recruiting our task force members, and I mentioned that I would return to you. So that's the update on where we are, and interested in your thoughts or feedback, or anything else you would like to change in terms of the direction that you originally provided.
Great, thank you, Director Gray. Any comments for Director Gray or questions? Yes, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the reasons for the delay. Clearly, we've got a lot of committees for people that and we're struggling for time. I'm glad to see that we got some extra funding. I think what we're doing is fighting against the timeline of the funding running out. So knowing that we won't start till June, and then it's going to take several months for the committee to get going and start thinking through. By the end of that, we could have run out of money for the city of Oak Ridge, and services could potentially stop up there. So I'm hoping that there's a plan C for finding additional funding if no reasonable and technical ways to solve the issue have surfaced by the time the funding has run out. Because from what I'm guessing, it'll probably run out by the end of this year or close to that.
It should assist with full funding for Oak Ridge into next fiscal year. Exactly how far will depend on, this year, their budgetary circumstance was made worse by overtime costs, which were from the difficulty in recruiting to the community of Oak Ridge. So I will keep track with the city of Oak Ridge. I want to make sure that we give our community comfort that services will not stop. So if Oak Ridge were, for example, to not be able to provide 24/7 service for a period of time out of their fire and EMS, we have cooperative agreements with other EMS providers. It would impact the timeline of response to calls, which is not insignificant, but EMS services would remain for the period of time that we were still trying to resolve as much as we could the funding challenges. And there's, I think there are a number of questions about what will the task force come up with, and are any of the options that the task force comes up with going to be viable options within our community and the community context where so many of our services are at risk of having partial coverage. So there is certainly a lot of uncertainty, but their services will remain during this period of time.
I'll just clarify that I meant by the end of 2025, rather than the fiscal.
Oh, the year 2025.
Right, which mentions some funding going into the following fiscal year. giving the committee maybe 6 months or so to be able to figure out if there are any resolution to the problem. I hear what you're saying, is there is a possibility if we don't have solutions, funding solutions specifically, that we may face some cut in services, maybe not all the services going away. Even that is going to be so highly concerning for the community up there, and detrimental to the life and safety of people who may have an incident in potential off hours, whatever they may be. That is not set in stone at the moment. But I think it's important to face the reality that that's a potential if we can't find viable options through the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. Just a logistical question. Is there, you want a task force large enough that it covers enough perspectives that we're not leaving anything out? So 5 chiefs and a commissioner, that's 6 already, but you don't want it so large that it's unwieldy and you can't arrive at something in the amount of time that we need to arrive at something. Do you have thoughts about the rest of the makeup, and particularly as it relates to the fact that there's a Eugene Springfield joint? I heard you say it's an elected joint task force. This is not, this has a representative from an elected body, but it's not an elected task force, and you get different perspectives, I'll say, depending on the makeup of the task force. Any thoughts about what we can expect to see and who's put forth to serve? From a
Yes.
stakeholder perspective, not names.
Yes, so each, the fire chiefs who have identified representation with them have identified 1 to 2 other people from the board or boards that oversee them. So I would anticipate, you know, we will be looking at a group of probably 15 to 20 people, which is bigger than your ideal working group, and there are so many stakeholders that it's a difficult balance.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, an appreciation to Brenda Moore in advance for the great work I know she'll do. Thank you.
Yeah, just maybe for just a naive question from me, I'm just kind of wondering, when you started off, you said that there's very commercial payers into the system. Do you ever see that trend changing? I mean, for this, because it looks to me like if we're going to find funding, this is going to be like a forever thing, because the basic system of how it's paid and premised is not going to change. Do you see that changing, I wonder?
No, and the reason for that is those of us who are commercially insured have very high cost sharing requirements in the use of the EMS system. And so most of us, if we can find someone to drive us to the ED, even if we shouldn't, we usually make that choice. Now, fire med is an option. I would really encourage anyone in our community who's commercially insured in particular and doesn't have fire med to get fire med, because it takes away that barrier of financial burden. But for Medicare and Medicaid, cost sharing is not permitted by state and federal law. So there is not that same barrier for someone to call 911 and ask for an ambulance, which then contributes to a higher percentage. We can't get the payer mix because of the difference in cost sharing requirements. So I don't see that changing.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. You know, it seems like yesterday, 2011, 2012, when we had a EMS task force and came up with some recommendations that were good for the time, but clearly times change. Looking forward to the work of this group. My first question is regarding fire med. My family's a member. I buy membership for our sons and their families. And fire med is relatively inexpensive compared to what you would pay should you have a life flight, or we pay for the, we personally pay for the whole thing. But I guess my question regarding that is more an ethereal question. Why don't people join FireMed? Because, I'm presuming that the business plan for FireMed is a strong one, that it's not, that the services that they provide don't eat up the premiums that people pay. That it is a, I'm not going to say profit center, but it's a revenue source for the system. Is that a correct assumption on my part? From your perspective or from your knowledge?
I would need Chief Caven at the table
Yeah.
to feel like I could accurately answer that question. Certainly, the prices have been kept reasonable. I don't know how that has looked over time in terms of the price of FireMed keeping up with inflation.
Yeah. Well, good. I think once again, times change, and I'm looking forward to the work of the task force. And I'm presuming both of our CCOs are involved in this.
Our CCOs are being made aware, but are not, and of course, with the Lane Community Health Council, came up with funding to support Oak Ridge, but they're not going to be at the table for this task force because they do not maintain oversight of ambulance services.
Okay.
Yes.
But they are check writers, both of them. So then brings up another question regarding Oak Ridge. That was a $400,000 grant. Is there an estimate that you can cite about how much does it cost to provide ambulance service to Oak Ridge on an annual basis? Is there a number there? I realize that it's so variable depending on the services that are required. But.
Yes, we can get that for you. I
I'd love to
don't
hear it.
recall it off the top of my head, but of course, they have an annual budget, and we can certainly get you that number.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad that Commissioner Buck is involved in this because you've had a pretty close eye on Oak Ridge through a lot of issues over the years since you became a commissioner and likely before that. Understanding the nuances of services that are needed in a town such as Oak Ridge, which is remote from a lot of service, has a highway that runs right through it. Most people know Oak Ridge because of Highway 58, and that's it. And having knowledge of the people that live there and the needs that they have is particularly important because Oak Ridge, while it is singular, it is representative of our remote communities, some of which are not incorporated. Thanks.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Yeah, just real quick. I also am glad that we've got Commissioner Buck on this task force. I will say that since it was first presented by Eugene Fire Chief Caven, thank you, Fire Chief Caven, I'm gonna hear about that. It's starting to pick up some energy, and I'm hearing about it at different gatherings and different meetings, and it was kind of surprising the different points of view you get. And as Commissioner Trigger pointed out, the right amount of people, I think this is going to be it's going to be a longer process than when we want to talk about, or really in mid out front. It's with 15 to 20 people, it's going to be all over the board on what we're getting and how we navigate this. If Mr. Buck, if you're not going to make a meeting or if something comes up, I know my rural communities are really concerned about this. Some of these updates are helpful for me when I answer these phone calls and meet in person. So I'm much more excited now about this task force and intrigued than I was previously. So good luck. It's going to be a in-depth conversation.
Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. I thought of one other thing I wanted to ask about. It's sort of a dual question for our administrator and you is, what is the timeline of us hearing back from our public safety funding task force? And in what, if any way, at this stage, can you anticipate that there might be some convergence in some of those discussions or potential solutions?
I was going to update the board on the Public Safety Funding Task Force under my announcements. They met last week for a several-hour session. They're meeting again this next Monday for 3 or 4 hours. That's the last scheduled meeting. They may schedule more. Again, I've asked for recommendations by April 1st. Kind of just set that as a target so that they can try to meet that. I think they're making progress. My hope is that they'll be able to make that deadline, but of course we also want them to be able to complete their work and have it be thoughtful and good recommendations and all of that. So again, my hope is, I think all of our hopes is we'll have recommendations for the board somewhere around the beginning of the second quarter.
And in terms of how might the recommendations come together, I'm not aware of what the Public Safety Task Force is currently considering in terms of their recommendations. I will say that if there's a pathway similar to prior joint elected task forces that would look to the potential of property tax income to assist. And I don't know if that will be a recommendation. It's just the history of prior task forces. There's certainly a wide variety of views on that, particularly since some communities, Springfield in particular, faces a high level of property tax compression compared to other places. And so depending on how you structure it, there are property taxes that supersede others, and then people can lose dollars. There are also models of taxation, for example, a district has been recommended in the past, which would be pretty highly controversial because that also would take the oversight of the EMS services outside of municipal control. And that is largely not favored from the conversations that I've had so far with some of the larger municipal partners. So I think and there may be other mechanisms that haven't been considered in other joint task forces, which is why we're bringing in someone like Brenda, who has the expertise and has worked with consultants on this topic and has brought forward ideas about what's happening elsewhere. There's a lot in this in terms of what solutions we could look at that would ultimately be amenable to the county as well as municipalities within our geography. So lots to come. And I don't know if you have anything about what the Public Safety Task Force is looking at.
They have not been looking at funding or structures for fire and EMS service, so that hasn't been directly a part of that. You know, if there are recommendations that may come out that may open up the potential for consideration of doing something in this area, possibly, but that has not been an explicit conversation that they've had. They're focused primarily on Lane County's public safety services, patrol, corrections, prosecution, parole and probation, youth services. That's been the bulk of where their conversations have been focused.
Thank you.
Director Gray, sorry?
If I just may, this is an opportunity to praise Brenda, as we should on a regular basis. You know, the fact that she's volunteered to do this and included as a part of the fee for services that we pay to LCOG. And, you know, we all know that before Brenda was with LCOG, she was with the City of Eugene as a legislative liaison. She brings a tremendous amount of broad knowledge to the work. I think it's an indication of the potential success of the task force when you have a facilitator with that kind of quiver of arrows that Brenda brings to the table. So pass that along for me, please.
Thank you. And I think what I would hope for is either head nods in support of the adjustment to the timeline or direction to change that.
Looks like you have 4 or 5 head nods to proceed as planned.
Great.
Well done and well negotiated, if that's a compliment we can give you. Thank you for heading up this, Director Gray. You're awesome. All right, onward to our 8th item on our agenda, the Community Justice and Rehab Services item. We have a board order, and it looks like Greg Rickoff, our Community Justice and Rehab Services Director, and I hope I'm not going to get this name wrong. Greet G? Am I close?
Not bad, but Gracia.
Oh, I would have never gotten that.
It sounds like a C, so, and I answered anything close.
Gracia, that is great. I appreciate that very much. Gracia Brusman, our Parole and Probation Supervisor. So, Mr. Mokreisky, if you have any words to introduce, please go ahead.
I think I'll turn it over to Mr. Rickoff and just ask, maybe there was some public comment about strings attached to the grant funding, so maybe you can address that for commissioners as well.
I'll be pleased to. Chair Lovell, commissioners, we come bearing good news-ish. I'm Greg Rickoff. I am here before you as the Director of Community Justice and Rehabilitation Services. With me is Gracia Brusman, a remarkable individual, and if you've not had time with her, I'd urge you to find some time. Gracia has been a part of parole and probation for many years, for about the last 8 years or so. She has been a supervisor, really overseeing all of the units within PNP. For the past 2 years, she's been acting as Donovan Dumeyer's acting in capacity when Donovan hasn't been able to work through assignments, so has really stepped into a leadership role. I have asked her to serve as the acting manager since Donovan's retirement on January 3rd. So Crecia will be handling the details of this grant. This has been a long journey for us to get here. This effort actually started with the last biennium when the bottom fell out of the grant and aid funding going into community corrections. We started working with the remarkable partnership in the policy division to identify grants that could come in and help us. The policy division did a tremendous job of finding this particular grant. So it's great thanks to them. This is a partnership right now between parole and probation, public health, behavioral health, the sheriff's office, and a number of partners to work on mental health collaboration for individuals coming out of the jail or coming out of prison, sometimes coming directly out of the state hospital back into our community to help us prepare and provide really the interweaving of services that are needed to help people succeed. It is a $825,000 grant over a 3-year period. It will allow us to do a number of things that we've wanted to do for some time, up to and including having a van at the disposal of the behavioral health, the mental health unit, so that they can get out and work within the community. Lots of training opportunity, chance to build the skills. This is a area where we lead the state of Oregon in terms of community corrections. Our mental health unit, which is comprised of a portion of a supervisor and 3 full-time parole and probation officers, has started to take on the teaching of parole officers across the state to learn this skill set. So it's something that really and truly, there's been fits and starts in other counties, but by and large, this is the most extensive and complete program in the state of Oregon, and this gives us a chance to build on that. This grant was awarded in the fall, and it was, approved by the prior administration. It does include 49 conditions that the county must meet to qualify for this grant. We have not seen any changes to those conditions as of yet. We do expect there to be changes. The real issue for us is, as a 3-year grant, we really expect to be able to make use of this starting in the new fiscal year. So we have a little bit of time, and we will ask the county administrator, should you pass the order today and approve the county administrator's signing of this contract, we would want to look and understand what the conditions are that might be changing from what we received in the fall and what might we be facing now. Clearly, a lot is going to change. There's requirements that we engaged successfully with clients with limited English proficiency. There are any number of civil rights requirements of us. We do expect, given some of the executive orders, that those things will be changing. We don't know what those changes are yet. So with that, let me turn it over to Crecia and have her talk about some of the details of the grant itself.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I think can you hear me? It's hard to see if it's projecting. Okay.
Perfect.
So what this grant, I think, really does is sort of 3 parts. One is, I think it increases the collaboration that I think the mental health unit has already established, but bolsters that. We are still finding that some clients are still falling through the cracks. that we're not being able to identify those clients, either coming out of the court system or coming out of the prison system that have gone to the state hospital, that are not being identified and are not on our radar screen until they're out in the community, and so that's problematic. So I think the grant will help with that. Secondarily, it really does create a sort of a care coordination model. So it's a work group will be formulated and put together so that we can create, implement, and then solidify a multidisciplinary care coordination for these clients. The mental health unit is comprised of 3 officers now that are running full-time. I think the grant also will help with additional FTE that we need to actually really implement that care coordination model so that we can do a better job of serving that clientele. We now have 2,200 clients on supervision. By 2026, it's looking to be 2,900. So that also means that the mental health clients will increase as well. And so we need that FTE to be able to supervise that clientele. And then the third point I think Greg mentioned was the outfitting of being able to go out into the community. The mental health unit currently does do that on a limited basis. What this grant does is help to create a van that's outfitted for those units to go out there and meet the clients where they're at. It's a completely different supervision model than we do with our regular clientele. These clients do not come to us, we need to come to them. And so being able to meet the needs so that we can address their needs, their risks, and I can go deeper into the weeds, but if you have questions, I can answer those.
I see a lot of copious notes here. There's questions brewing. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. 2 questions and then addressing the public comment we heard this morning. I hear you basically saying we don't know yet. And I will also just say to that, I meant to say this when Anna was here in the hall this morning, but I'll say it to you. It will be interesting to see what, if any, changes that restrict our ability to serve trans folks in this program, because there undoubtedly are trans folks that we won't know they're trans folks, and we will be serving them unwittingly across the organization. This is one of the challenges of these edicts. So just wanted to put that out there. The van you mentioned, in what way will it be similar or different to the mobile crisis units that we have deployed already, is my first question.
And I'm happy to take that. Chair level, Commissioner Trieger, it'll be different. It will not be responding per se to incidents. It will go and serve. What we do right now is we're working with Catholic Community Services. We go and set up for the day, put out tables, have materials, engage in with community members. So it'll be more of a visiting van that will work with a lot of our nonprofits. We get invitations from across the community, again, where we can set up and be found within community. So it won't have that first responder element.
Got it, thank you. So it's not a crisis response.
Correct.
It's a sort of field mobile office kind of thing. Okay, great. That's helpful, thank you. And then my other question is the planning, the first year or so planning. We're doing that with all internal resources. I assume that's not going to be, we just heard about seat a big task force, find a facilitator. That is really just the work that staff does all the time when a new program or an opportunity for new programs comes online, right? It's really just that simple.
It is that. It is, it provides some confidence for us that we'll be able to pay for some of these services, but we are, it is work we are doing currently.
Great, thank you.
Great question. Anyone else? Commissioner Farr.
Pleased to meet you.
Meet you.
I look forward to visiting you out in Bethel one of these times. It always pleases me and makes me proud to hear when we are leading the state as a county. And Greg, your words are our mental health unit is an area that we lead the state. We take on the teaching of parole officers throughout the state. You get best practices, you bring them here and provide services in a way that you don't provide them to the other clientele. At services that are needed. And the goal is to eliminate if we can, recidivism. And I love Commissioner Trieger's question. I was going to ask a similar question regarding our mobile crisis. And the difference is this is proactive. The people we're serving aren't in crisis, but we're helping them is to help them to avoid crisis. That's my characteristic of it, is that characterization of it.
Correct. So, I think historically how we've supervised clients, right, is you have office visits and you set up appointments and you need to be here. That doesn't work for this clientele. You can't tell them to be in the office at 10 a.m. on a Monday. They don't show up. Historically, what would happen is you go out, try to find them. You can't find them because 50% of the clients in our mental health unit are homeless. And so then therefore you're issuing warrants. And so instead of going down that traditional road, really, that mobile unit is to go out into the communities, meet clients where they're at, and meet them that halfway, right? So it's not the standard traditional supervision model that we have historically done, which does lead the state, and so we're proud of that.
And thank you. And that's not the only point I made. Yesterday in our legislative committee meeting, we talked about how we do lead the state in certain areas. And one thing that we're asking for all the time is how do we fund the programs that we know we're going to, or we have a good inclination that we're going to be successful in. How do we fund them, not just to provide the services to the people in Lane County, but to demonstrate how well things can be done so that other people can follow our best practices without some of the research and the trial and error sometimes that goes into the best practices that we provide. So as we look to the legislature, for instance, for help in funding our state-leading programs, it's good to have a portfolio in hand saying, not only do we do it well, but we help others to do it well also. So they're getting twice the bang for their funding money because they're not just teaching us to do it, we're teaching others. To me, that is a really important part of the work that we do, developing that portfolio of success that other communities can lean on. Bravo, and it's a pleasure to meet you. I pass your offices almost every single day, at least once. So I look forward to seeing you out there. Thank you.
Yes, you should come on by.
Chair Lovell, Commissioner Farr, yes, and if I can help set up a coffee date or something, I'd be pleased to do that. There have been times of crisis where Eugene police officers, instead of taking an individual to the jail, brings them to parole and probation, specifically for Mercedes or Michelle. These are individuals that have gone above and beyond where we have clients asking for their POs by name. Brittany is the third officer. And to see and understand the depth of the relationship they have built with individuals is really quite remarkable. But when you start having law enforcement see the connection to the PO as the best possible alternative for the individual they have in the back of their car, it really makes a difference. So even in times of crisis, this is a model that's proven to work, and their ability to de-escalate is remarkable. I think I've shared with you the story of Michelle, who, when she couldn't get her clients into Lane County Behavioral Health, she went out to get her qualified mental health professional certification. So they are, and she's now working on her PhD. So these are individuals that are advancing their career in this work, and what we can do to support them and then to some extent get out of their way and let them just do the magic of working with clients is really quite impressive. So when you stop by, get some time with the mental health unit.
I intend to. Thank you very much.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Yes, well, this is great news and great, Cha. You are a welcomed member on the PSEC, so we appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll have to have broad shoulders because I told the chair how to pronounce your name. You answered to it at the PSCC, so you were that kind. We appreciate it. No, I just want to say thanks for everything. And this is I was really curious how that with the mobile van would work out, and it seems to me like a great idea, a great plan. I mean, how many people do you have that maybe shouldn't be driving, and then we can go and visit? And so I look forward to seeing where this goes. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Buck.
Are there any other areas of the state where they have now moved to a program like this where they, their parole and probation departments go out into the field to meet their clients like this? It seems pretty newish, and I think it's wonderful.
It is, and I would have to say, Multnomah County did this before we did it, but it was much more, at the risk of offending anybody from Multnomah County in the audience, it's a little bit more passive. It doesn't have the robust engagement, and it doesn't have the case management of individuals. It really is more a way to be found out in the community, whereas our officers are actively working, at case managing hundreds of cases.
And frankly, they're much smaller geographically speaking. So we've got our work cut out for us, fine people.
Yes, we do.
But I appreciate the bringing new ideas out, like going to people to serve them. We're seeing this change in healthcare needs. We're seeing this change in how we work with those who are unsheltered and housing needs, and it seems like this is just a new best practice model. I'm fully in support. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you. One more thought. It just seems to me this, when you said that law enforcement will sometimes opt to connect the person with their parole supervisor instead of another route, it's just another part of the change of culture of all the intersectionality of all the organizations and entities and services working with law enforcement is that first point of contact often. And so it's just sort of in keeping with the deflection model too, of just giving law enforcement as many possible options only helps them do their job better. So I hear this sort of as of a piece with that as well.
Yeah, I think the mental health unit has done a good job of connecting with community partners and with law enforcement to make those connections. And luckily, yes, that's worked, and law enforcement has really reached out frequently to that unit because these are clients that you have habitual, repeated contact with.
And so how and where is this, like the work that Jeremy's doing, the intentional partnership with in downtown Eugene in particular, is this not sort of similar?
I would have to say that, unfortunately, Jeremy, of course, has moved on to the University of Oregon, but the FIT team and our mental health unit are the best of friends. Regular engagement, often going out together, collaborating on cases, working with individuals in a united front. So they really are best of allies and partners in doing exactly that work. If you could imagine how you would hope it would work from a distance, that's actually how it's working.
Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, we're running short on time, but Gracia, I just want to make sure that the public knows something that you brought up, because I've lived through this, and that's about trying to find mental health for your loved ones when you're trying to find a doctor or a clinic or a specific time or date to bring them to that. The fact is that just it just doesn't happen. You are out looking for your loved one in the weeds and the bushes and by the river, trying to get them help, and once you finally make contact with them, you maybe have 20 minutes of negotiable time to either A, get them a haircut, make sure they're okay, give them some encouragement, let alone try to get them to an appointment. So I want to know, I just want to make sure that the public knows how much of a game changer that this mobile van can be, especially for loved ones who maybe have that contact in 20 minutes and say, hey, can I get you in the car? Can we go down and see this van? And then we can at least have a hope of some connection happening when no connection ever happens. And so I just want the public to know, for me living through that experience, this is going to be a game changer, and it's going to save lives. And so I want to commend you on getting that to the floor.
It is a game changer because we don't have that now.
Right.
And so what they've done now is just opened it up for the clients to come at any time. So this takes it the next step. So you're right.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And Mr. Rickoff, you had said too, just about some of the uncertainties going forward. We hear that obviously a lot in the last number of months, but I just want the public also to know what I hear from our staff and our people is that regardless of what happens, we're bound, damn determined to do the best we can with what we're given. And I just appreciate that attitude going forward. So thank you again for supervising those guys, what you do.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Just a smiling aside, your name, Krecha, you should feel at home in the place where you work and where I live. It's also called Danebo.
Yes, yes.
All right, if there's any more comments or questions, we can move forward to our ninth item. I'm sorry, no, we're not moving. We have a board order. I knew that in my head. I don't know why I didn't speak that out. I'm looking for a motion, Vice Chair.
Chair, I've got a motion. I move to approve Order 25020402 in the matter of approving acceptance of one grant in the amount of $825,000 from the Department of Justice and increasing appropriations in the Special Revenue Fund of $300,000 in Community Justice and Rehabilitation Services Department, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute award documents and any subcontracts.
I'll second.
We have a motion by the Vice Chair, seconded by Commissioner Buck for Order 25020402 in the matter of approving a grant for $825,000. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. Motion passes 5-0 to approve acceptance of one grant in the amount of $825,000 from the Department of Justice and increasing appropriations in the Special Revenue Fund of $300,000 in Community Justice and Rehab Services Department, and delegating the authority to the county administrator or administrator to execute award documents and any subcontracts. Well done. Thank you again so much. Appreciate you. On now to the 9th item on county administration. We have a board order in front of us, and our esteemed economic development manager, Jason Harris, is here with someone new. Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Harris, if you will, sir, or Mr. Mokrasky, go ahead.
I'll turn it over to Jason. I think he's bringing up a presentation here. We have historically done community grants. These are transient lodging tax funds that we receive and go through a competitive process to work with our rural communities, in particular to allocate TLT dollars for important tourism-related projects. And so that is the item before you, and I'll give it over to Jason to lead us through the item.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, members of the public watching online. I'm Jason Harris, Lane County's Community Economic Development Manager. I'd also like to take the opportunity and introduce you to Samantha Roberts, a new addition to our two-person program in the Community Economic Development Policy Division. She is assisted on this item. Wanted her to be a part of the conversation today. As our County Manager referenced, we are here with an annual disbursement of transit lodging tax revenues. It's under a program called Rural Tourism Marketing Program, and this is the 2025 allocation to our 10 rural cities. And we have a secondary action, which is a request to issue a 5-year request for proposal process for a services agreement for the McKenzie River area. I have a short presentation just to outline the program today. Again, this Rural Tourism Marketing Program, the RTMP, you'll see kind of throughout the staff memo, is this description. It's established under Lane Code, and it's under the board's discretion, in which 10% of the transit lodging tax revenues are dispersed to our 10 rural cities in the McKenzie River area. The objective criteria really to induce visitorship throughout our rural communities, increase length of stays throughout and visitation the county, as well as return visitation. Here are just a short listing of some of the programs and projects that have been funded in the past with these funds. And as you'll see, one common denominator, most of all of our rural communities have some level of annual festivals and activities. Many of these communities utilize these funds to help support those events and just to induce support for their business community, as well as annual promotion and visitorship, working in coordination with Travel Lane, our tourism destination marketing organization. In the staff memo, we had an allocation of past years, just showing kind of the continued disbursements. You will really note in 2024, last year, we had a substantive bump, and that was really of disbursements, and that was really in relation to having some reserves built up in the program to be released. And this was meant to both provide an opportunity for those communities to set aside some reserves, as these are discretionary expenditures that's allocated. And so if there was ever a point in the future where we saw any significant drop, they would have some reserves to work off. The total for this year of 2025 is $521,649. of which we, again, are allocating to the 10 rural cities. And as in past years' process, since there is no formal incorporated city in the McKenzie River area, we have used an annual request for proposal process to select an organization to administer the funds for that year. But in recognition of the fire recovery efforts and really to support long-term recovery, staff is recommending that we issue a request for proposal for a 5-year services agreement to provide a greater continuity of operations for longer-term planning of programming and events. The Board of Commissioners will still be asked annually to allocate funding to the McKenzie River. This would just eliminate the annual request for proposal process and build a little bit more longer-term and stable commitment there. And that does speak to this last item. As we recognize and reference, the McKenzie River is one of the designations for distribution of these funds under the Lane Code. As I referenced, the request for proposal process conducted annually. This year, we're asking for a 5-year services agreement authorization. Funding still to be approved annually, and we'll be returning to the board at the completion of that request for proposal process to designate funding for 2025. And with that, we're both available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the board, Commissioner Buck.
I'll just mention for the board regarding the McKenzie River allocation and the 5-year request, generally that's been with the McKenzie Chamber. There hasn't really been a lot of other viable applicants. And when others have inquired, they actually join the chamber in participating with their activities. So they've always been very responsible and very thoughtful in their allocation of these tourism dollars in the past. Thank you, Chair.
Super. Yes, Vice Chair.
I just had a quick question. So we get the 16,598 for each community, and then you said at 10%?
The allocations are on a percentage basis, of which there's, of the total funding, as highlighted, Chair or Vice Chair, to the question, 35% of the total funding is established as a base allocation to be provided. The remaining 65% is then distributed based on an annual 5-year average of expenditure activity. And that's been fairly stable over the past 5 years. We've seen maybe a 1% or 2% change of distribution, but for the most part, it's been pretty stable thereafter.
Perfect. I was curious what the 10% of what was, so thank you.
Chair, Vice Chair, to better clarify, the 10% is 10% of the 3% TLT allocation. So the county has 3 TLT tax funds, 2%, a 5%, and a 3%. This program is funded from the 3% TLT tax.
Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And Samantha, welcome. The office that I sit in upstairs was formerly occupied by somebody called Roberts. So, maybe you know them. I see the listing of appropriations, including McKenzie. It's got 9 cities, which does not include Eugene and Springfield, of course, because we're not rural. Doesn't include Notai. So is there a reason for that? I mean, Notai is kind of off the beaten path, and maybe they don't want people to visit. I don't know.
Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner Farr, under the Lane Code, it designates the 10 rural cities, incorporated rural cities, and then the McKenzie River area. So no other unincorporated community or area is designated under the.
And Notai is an incorporated city that's not listed as a recipient, though. So, but okay, that's a, and that's a question. You know, the highway used to go through Notai, and now the people of Notai are very happy, I think, that the highway no longer goes through Notai. But it is an incorporated city, but it's not listed. So I'm not asking for reasons for that. I just, it's a curious note. Thanks.
Commissioner Buck.
I just wanted to note, I don't think Notai is an incorporated city. We have 12 within Lane County.
It is
unincorporated, if that's what you meant.
You know, I stand corrected, it is, yeah. Yep, it is, it's unincorporated, as is Elmira. Thank you.
Just a quick question I might have is, noticing obviously that the funds are a little bit different than they were last year, a little bit lower, and we're asking for a 5-year plan. My question is those funds tended to slope lower for the next 5 years, or we may have a little kick back up? Where do you think we'll be in 5 years, just out of curiosity?
Chair, Commission, it's an excellent question. TLT is transient lodging tax revenue is challenging, to say the least, to forecast because it is one of those discretionary consumer expenditures. However, we have been seeing year-to-year growth coming out of COVID, and in particular this last year, more substantial. It's hard to gauge the future trends, but sitting in the travel lane board meetings as they forecast, they are projecting continued small incremental growth, the 2 to 3% on average to be expected.
Being a part of the Big Ten helps a little bit. Yeah, good deal. Any other questions or comments? Samantha, officially welcoming you. I heard you came from the Eugene Chamber, and thank you for coming to the county and helping Jason out. We're going to make him shine and make you shine, so it'll be awesome. Appreciate you very much. Any other comments for the board? If not, we can have an order that we have in front of us. Chair, how about a board? How about a motion?
Absolutely, Chair. I move to approve Order 25020403 in the matter of approving allocations totaling $470,488 for 2025 Rural Tourism Marketing Program, RTMP. Projects in the cities of Coburg, Cottage Grove, Cresswell, Dune City, Florence, Junction City, Wool, Oak Ridge, Veneta, and Westford.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck to move and approve the 2025 Rural Tourism Marketing Funding for $470,488. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0 to approve the 2025 Rural Tourism Marketing Program funding allocations totaling $470,488 for the rural cities of Coburg, Cottage Grove, Cresswell, Dune City, Florence, Junction City, Lowell, Oak Ridge, Veneta, and Westford, and to authorize issuance of the RFP for the 5-year RMT services agreement for the McKenzie River area. Indeed. Thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you all.
Hey, Jason.
Next on our list is Mr. Mokrasky. If you've already blurbed out your announcements, or do you have more?
We have 56 minutes.
I know, right? You could elaborate on all of them.
I have a lot to share with you. I would like to take a few minutes, if it's okay, Chair.
You bet.
Commissioners, to particularly make some comments on some things that were referenced here earlier today and our work to monitor the federal rulemaking that is happening. I'm going to invite Eve Gray up here in a moment to share some specific things. You can come up here now, Eve. But I just want to set the stage a little bit with this to say, first of all, there's a lot happening, right? There's a lot of executive orders and discussions that are creating uncertainty and questions that are coming up. I want to be really clear, and the board may have seen an email that our county council sent to all staff yesterday sharing, sort of the law around politics in the workplace. I want to be very clear that our staff will not participate in political rancor. So that there clearly is, or I should say, a partisan rancor. There's a lot of feelings and perspectives and ideas around the federal rulemaking and things that are happening and coming out of Washington, D.C. Our goal at the staff level is not to participate in that partisan rancor. So we will seek not to do that, but we will analyze the impacts. We do have a responsibility, right, to analyze the impacts of rules that are coming out, funding changes that are happening, and we do have a responsibility to advocate for the people that we serve, our residents in Lane County. So that's the work that we will do. I just want to be really clear that when we're sharing these updates and we're doing this work, It's not about a partisan perspective. It's really trying to cut through and understand what are the impacts to our organization in Lane County, to our employees, ultimately to the people that we serve in the community. So it was referenced, I think maybe Commissioner Trieger, you referenced the staff group that is meeting. We do have what we call a policy group. Now this is for commissioners who participated in the ICS, which stands for Incident Command System structure. This is the national structure we use for responding to emergencies, right? So it's very sort of, you have an incident commander and you have a, operations chief, finance chief, logistics chief. It's a way to organize response to incidents that happen, typically emergency related incidents. We deployed that structure during the COVID era for a long period of time, particularly during the height of COVID, to mobilize our efforts so that we were as things were constantly changing, right? When we first didn't have vaccines, and it's like, how are we doing testing and contact tracing? Then we had vaccines, how are we getting vaccines out to folks? It was a way to organize. So the policy group, as commissioners I think understand, the policy group under the ICX, the Incident Command System, is a group that is identified to make decisions operationally within the context of the incident that we're managing. So in this sense, we've stood up a policy group, which is essentially our department heads, our elected and appointed department heads, knowing that we will bring updates to commissioners. We will potentially need to come, and the commissioners may need to take action on certain items. We need to take action. So that will always happen. But because things are happening so quickly, we've stood up this policy group team of elected and appointed department heads. They're now meeting 3 times a week. So this is the same structure, again, we set up during COVID, where it's about 2 days a week. We're meeting for 30 minutes, so it's a quick touch base virtually, say, here's what's happening. Steve Adams is here from our policy director, and his team is helping to sort of lead that work to monitor what's happening, what's changing, along with input from departments, particularly in Health and Human Services, because there's so much activity happening there. Then 1 day a week, we spend an hour where we'll carve out time to actually dive into more substantive things so that we have a little bit of time to dig into that. So this is a disruptive period we're going through right now, and that's why we have this structure. Hopefully we won't need to have this structure and this level of review and analysis over the long term, but right now we think that is what is warranted. We have a reporter in, we have media inquiries, we have inquiries from our employees, we have inquiries from the community, and so a lot of questions are coming our way, and our job right now is to try to field those questions and respond with facts and what we know, knowing that a lot of what we know is not very certain at this point, because there are things that come out and then things that get referred to the courts and then things that get repealed. So that is the structure we have in place. I wanted to make note of, we sent a public media release out Friday. And that was essentially to notify the media and the public that, listen, we are monitoring these things. We have not experienced any changes in funding or in our services to date, and we are not changing anything as of now. We also sent a message out to our employees about a week ago, essentially outlining all that. And so I also want to address this both for our employees and for the public that, to date, we're not aware of any specific or immediate changes to our services. We will address some things coming out of the CDC here this morning. Many of the new rules that are applying to federal workers, changes around positions and the way in which employees are working, don't affect our employees at this time. And then also there have been a lot of questions about sanctuary, Oregon sanctuary promise, and the federal rules that are coming out. And we've been very clear that we have to comply both with federal law and with state laws. And we're trying to understand the impacts of both of those and our requirements under those. And so we did provide direction to our employees. And there is some, law enforcement has direction from, particularly in the sheriff's office, from the sheriff. We have some more nuanced things in our health-related areas because of HIPAA rules that are in place. Broadly, what we've said to our employees, we provided a central point of contact for any employees that in the course of our work are contacted come in contact with immigration officials so that all of that, we're not leaving sort of discretion up and interpretation up to, we have over 2,000 employees in Lane County, that we're really trying to make sure that we have central points of contact and central points of decision-making to ensure that we're following both federal and state laws. So we've provided that central point of intake where there's any question about how that should happen. The last thing I will say before making a comment about what Eve is here to address with you, and I think you can expect that maybe we will, if it's not weekly, we will regularly come to you, at least under county administrator updates, and provide you with what's new, because things at the moment are changing rather quickly. But I wanted, again, try to ground us in the things that continue to be true here for Lane County, that we have a longstanding stated purpose that our Board of Commissioners has said. Our purpose in Lane County is to improve lives. We have a mission that we are committed to responsibly manage available resources to deliver vital community-centered services with passion, drive, and focus. We have our 3 core behaviors, which we talked about this morning: a passion to serve, drive to connect, a focus on solutions. We have our core values in Lane County of integrity, excellence, equity, and respect, longstanding. And we remain committed to our strategic lenses in Lane County of stewardship of resources, equity, and collective impact. So these things were true several weeks ago. They remain true today, and we remain committed to all of those things. So that's a lot, just to sort of set the stage and provide the context for everyone, that they know that we're doing a lot of monitoring and work, and we're also trying to ground ourselves in who we are as an organization, as a community, and what we're focused on, and what we will bring forward to you. Eve is here because we do recently, there have been some things that have come out of the Center for Disease Control, and particularly now related to physician access to treatment guidelines. And so we wanted to let you know about what's happening there, what we're seeing there, and how our public health, our community health centers and public health teams are responding to that. And so I'll turn it over, Eve, to you to walk through that.
Thank you. Maintaining some social distance with my boss here, so trying to keep everyone healthy. I think what we are looking at right now, and this is really just to inform all of you as the Board of Health, of the initial stoppage of data that was coming out of the Centers for Disease Control and other federal agencies, and the length of time that stoppage or that pause is has occurred is beginning to cause us some concern in our ability to both monitor the health of our community and respond to disease outbreaks in our community. So this is really just informational at this time. There's no 5-alarm fire that's happening, just to make sure that you are aware of what we're monitoring. So the CDC has always been our resource for monitoring outbreak data across state lines. Within the state of Oregon, we have pretty robust data from the state and from our state databases, and we continue to have access to that. Right now, of course, you've seen in the media, you've probably seen if you paid $7 a dozen for some eggs in the store, which I did the other day, that we do have an H5N1 outbreak in our nation. So far, that outbreak, it has been transmitted to some cats through raw pet food, and then there has been some human transmission, animal to human transmission. So far, no human to human transmission. Typically, we would rely on the CDC and go to their website every day to look and see what's happening, not just with that particular outbreak, but with any other outbreaks or other types of exposures that are impacting the health of public throughout the nation. It helps us to be seeing what's coming and be on our game. Right now, we don't have access to the CDC data on national outbreaks. So we have to rely on personal relationships that we have with the 49 other states around outbreaks that are occurring within their states. And This, for now, has been okay. We do have some concern about the length of time that a federal stoppage of data may happen because of our reliance on national systems to be able to predict what might be coming or impact our state. Some other things that have impacted us are the guidelines for treatment of sexually transmitted infections are down. And we have several diseases, gonorrhea and syphilis in particular, that tend to go through cycles of antibiotic resistance within a community. So the CDC is the one that tells us what resistance we are looking at for these particular sexually transmitted infections, and then they update guidelines around what antibiotics we should be using in our community based on any antibiotic resistance that they're seeing in strains of disease. Those guidelines are down. So we are now working with data that are several weeks old. We've saw an increase in calls to our health officer over the weekend of physicians trying to figure out how to treat patients they were seeing. We also have recognized that the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, their vaccine guidelines are down currently. So these were just updated within the last couple of months. There are a couple of things that these guidelines do. One is that physicians regularly go to this website to make sure that they are providing best practice, up-to-date guidelines. These guidelines also inform insurance companies. So with the Affordable Care Act, insurance is required to cover the vaccinations that are recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. Currently, there are no guidelines posted. There are historical guidelines, but no current guidelines. So we are going by what we have done in the past, but we're monitoring this, especially coming upon School Exclusion Day. It has been impactful. And the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance tool is down. So this is how we look at data nationally in terms of substance abuse or other health risk factors in young people. We do rely on federal data, in particular, to help us understand nuances in communities of youth that we don't have a large enough sample size in our community to draw conclusions, trans youth being one of those groups. We will look and see when those guidelines are reposted how trans youth are or are not represented in those data. We have to have the bigger sample sizes, however, in order to really understand how subgroups are impacted by different health risk factors in our community. And then the other thing that we are monitoring is access to newborn screening standards, which the CDC is the one that manufactures. Essentially, these are control tests to make sure that state laboratories are able to run newborn screening tests appropriately. So this is the heel stick and the little card that you put the baby's blood on that tests for some very, very severe metabolic diseases. As of yesterday in the state of Oregon, we were down to a 20-day supply on hand. States are currently working with each other to be sharing supplies. For states who have greater supply, we are hopeful that in the coming days the CDC will release that so that we can continue doing accurate newborn screening. But these are the things that we are monitoring currently, most concerned about in terms of impact for our ability to continue to provide good, solid research-based guidelines to be able to provide care to people in our community and monitor outbreaks. And if you want a whole lot more detail, I can bring Dr. Ledke. He briefed me this morning, but when we don't have a time certain, it's hard to get him here. So would be happy to do that if you have detailed questions. But otherwise, this is just a heads up that the length of this stoppage is getting to be concerning.
Yes, Commissioner Digger.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. When you say you're hopeful that the stoppage of data release will will come to an end and these sites will be, what gives you that hope? What indications are there that that will happen? And do you have any sense of how much longer it will be?
There is on the CDC website right now a banner that's posted stating that the CDC website is being updated based on the president's executive orders. Our best guess is that there is a review of the data to make sure that specific terms are removed from the website, for example, that this is our concern about access to data on transgender youth. There has not been an indication that the data access would cease permanently. Everything that we are hearing right now is that this is a pause for review against executive orders. So that is why we are hopeful we will begin to see some of this data back up online, potentially after the confirmation of a new Secretary for Health and Human Services, but hopefully before.
So you're, if I'm understanding you, you are fairly confident data is continuing to be collected, it's just not being disseminated.
That is correct. We have systems in place, laboratories report to all of those systems. None of that has been turned off.
Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Director Gray. You know, kind of alarming until we hear the hope that you have for that it's short-lived, and we'll join you in that hope. I've kind of paraphrased with something that you said at the end. So, are being able to provide good, updated guidelines regarding what has been historically provided up-to-date information is in jeopardy. Is that an accurate statement on my part? Then I can put my quotation marks around it and say, what's our concern here in Lane County? Well, you gave us a list regarding youth treatment, newborn monitoring systems, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to, immunizations, for instance, with school exclusion day coming up. I've written down the list right here, struggling to keep up as you talked. But these, giving physicians updated information that they rely on us to give them. In fact, I think we are required to give them this information. We're not able to do it at this point in time with any accuracy. All we have is historical information that may not be spot on, up to date, based on the national trends in, for instance, syphilis and gonorrhea and the changes that occur in those particular diseases. Okay, so I'm accurate in that.
Yes.
So when I talk today, later on today, when I say, what are you concerned about medically? Well, we're concerned that we're not able to give physicians accurate information because of the pause that's been placed on the information that historically has been provided by the presidential order.
That is correct.
Any other comments for Director Gray or questions?
Thank you for the
Dr.
time,
Icey? Yep.
Chair and Commissioners. And again, we'll just plan on, as we feel like there's relevant things that are happening either at the federal or the state level that are substantively impacting the work that we're doing or have the potential to substantively impact. We want to bring you that information in a timely way. So I think this spot on our agenda under County Administrator Announcements is a good place for us to be able to be flexible to provide those updates. That's all I have.
All right, well, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda, we have need for executive session. We will recess this session, and I'll read us into executive session. We'll recess, and at 1:30, the Board of County Commissioners will meet in the boardroom for one executive session. The session is to consult with legal counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are precluded from attending. Representatives of the news media are specifically redirected not to report on any deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. Members of the news media are not allowed to tape, video record, or otherwise record an executive session. Verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision may be made in executive session. We will return to public session after this executive session concludes. We are recessed.